Joe Brady was introduced as Bills head coach, and we learned a lot. Speaking of a lot, there's a lot of work to do in assembling this coaching staff. We're going to break it all down today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Well, folks, welcome in. We've got a lot to cover today, including, well, the Bills are going to have a new defensive coordinator, so I have some thoughts about that. The Bills need a lot when it comes to the coaching staff. So many assistant coaches are in other places already, leaving holes, but one hole that has been filled is the offensive line coach. So we'll talk about that. But I want to start with this press conference that the Bills had to introduce Joe Brady as head coach. And I'm not going to sit here and give you a play-by-play on what happened over an hour-long press conference, but I do want to share some things that really stood out to me about what was said and just my overall thoughts on the vibe. And we'll start there. My thought on the vibe here is you saw a very emotional Joe Brady, someone who looked very human. You could tell this all meant a lot to him. He felt very authentic, and he felt very energetic. He's not going to be the guy that gets up there and gives this perfectly articulated speech, but I think he speaks from the heart, and I think he's very honest with himself. And he comes across as very genuine to me. One of my favorite quotes was this. One of the things that the guys know about me, and look, it might be from the espresso, it might be from the Gatorade fast twitches, but I'm going to bring the energy every single day. And I believe people are going to feed off of that. This is a very unique one. I truly believe in being the temperature. I'm the weather, and they're going to feel it every single day. A mentality. I believe in everything about these guys right here and the mentality as we go forward. It is a nameless, faceless opponent that we're going against, and they've got to play us. No, not the other way around, and I mean that with everything. They've got to play the Buffalo Bills. They've got to play Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, not the other way around. And it does not matter the day of the week, the time of day. Is it outside? Is it inside? What's the weather? Just put the damn ball down. Let's go play. That's Buffalo. I enjoyed that. I think that Joe Brady is going to attack this opportunity with everything he has, with a lot of energy and just being very genuine. And I can really appreciate that. A very big theme in the remarks from Brandon Beane, in addition to Joe Brady and in the questions that were asked, was about alignment and collaboration. That was a very clear theme. You heard both Brady and Beane talk a lot about alignment and collaboration, which is a big deal. And Joe Brady defined alignment as this. He said, quote, alignment doesn't mean agreeing on everything. Alignment to me means we're both open in conversation and communication and understanding that we don't have to be yes men, but when we make a decision, when that door opens, there's no going backwards and there's no second guessing, and we're going all out with it. To me, that's alignment. Alignment is a shared vision for what we want and making sure we don't ever lose sight of that when we make decisions. You can't help but consider that somewhere along the way, the alignment between Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, it went away. And what concerns me about that is I feel like that's happened with a lot of key pillars under Sean McDermott. And I have a lot of respect for Sean McDermott, and I'm not going to sit here and try to pin things on him or blame him for things, but something happened here, because there was a point in time for many, many years where you never had a doubt about alignment and collaboration between Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. But that fell off somewhere along the way. And as you consider the relationships that Sean McDermott has had with his coordinators, think about the defensive side of the football, Leslie Frazier, right, to start. And how many times did Sean take away play calling from Leslie Frazier? Veteran coach, knows what he's doing, and the head coach can't help but insert himself. Happened with Bobby Babich as well. In fact, there was a year where Sean McDermott ran the defense himself. Offensively, you knew there was problems with Brian Daboll and that relationship. He fired Ken Dorsey a year and a half in. He openly criticized Joe Brady multiple times this year. I just worry a little bit about, as Sean McDermott extends relationships, that, you know, he's going to want to insert himself and take more control. And I would assume that as this team continued to get close and not break through, there became a lot of competitive tension and a lot of convictions on what you believe is the right thing. And I'm sure at some point, Sean McDermott said, you know, look, if this isn't going to happen, it's not going to be because I didn't try to do everything I could to put my stamps on all of this and take control. And somewhere along the way, the vision of alignment, collaboration, lockstep, right? That was a big phrase that they used early on. It went away. And I'm hopeful that that's restored with Joe Brady. Now, I think Brandon Beane certainly had some missteps along the way, but when that happens and you no longer are aligned and you no longer share that vision of how it's supposed to look and how you're supposed to get things done, well, then you can't continue. And that's where the Bills are. I really loved, and maybe my favorite thing that happened with Joe Brady was when he paid his respects to Sean McDermott. I thought he said some really good things. He said, I love Coach McDermott. I'm going to do everything I can to continue to build upon the foundation that he laid. Said the last 9 years matter and deserve respect. And I thought that was the most sincere, genuine thing that I've heard out of someone high up with the Bills in a long time about Sean McDermott. And that meant something to me. That really helps me bridge this gap, because I think I can simultaneously look back on Sean McDermott very fondly with a lot of respect and reverence for what he did as this team's head coach, how he became Buffalo, the success, but also, hey, how many chances are you going to get, man? You had 7 playoff runs with Josh Allen. You didn't get to a Super Bowl. We can't do this again. Like, I can respect, appreciate, admire what Sean McDermott did, but also simultaneously say, yeah, I understand we can't do this again. But especially for Joe Brady, as a guy that was brought in under Sean McDermott after he got fired from being an offensive coordinator and presented with the opportunity to be the quarterback's coach for Josh Allen. Yeah, there should be a lot of respect and admiration, and they had a lot of success together. And Joe Brady even acknowledged, I know I'm taking over a much different situation than what Sean McDermott did. I loved how Joe Brady was able to connect with the Buffalo side of this. I think that's really important. I've said multiple times in this process that the coach of the Bills and that their ability to connect with Buffalo is huge, right? It's different than any other place in the National Football League. And I thought he did a really good job of really highlighting that. And he said, look, Buffalo isn't just where I work, it's where my life changed. There's nowhere else I'd rather be than right here, right now. We talked about the passion of Bills Mafia. And, you know, when you go somewhere, you got to wear Bills logos, and you walk by someone and say, go Bills, and the power of the Go Bills, and talked about both of his kids being born in Buffalo. I thought that was really good. And started to really make that connection in a different type of way as he's now the leader of this football team. And that's important to me. And him highlighting those things was meaningful. I also love the emphasis that he had on the players. You know, I think the best coaches are the ones that realize it's all about the players, right? It's all about how do we maximize these players? How do we put them in situations where they can have their most success? And I thought that Joe Brady really connected with that message. And I also liked kind of the selfless portrayal of himself that he put out there. I think the best leaders are servant leaders. And this quote really connected with me. He said, "No element of my life has been about me. I don't put trophies behind me. There's nothing I do that's because of me. It's because of the people I surround myself with, the people that do all the sacrifices for that. I love to work, so I'm not going to go home and let my wife know, hey, now I've got to get back. It's time to work." I enjoy that competitive stamina that I believe I'm going to instill in our guys is the same mindset that I have to have. I don't look at this like, man, this is an achievement. I look at this as an opportunity to do what I love and an opportunity to work. It's a great quote. And I also love this. They were not shy about talking Super Bowl. Nobody. And that felt good. That felt good. Let's not pretend like this isn't what's the most important thing here. And Joe Brady said, I didn't take this job to shy away from expectations. I sure as hell did not do that. I'm embracing it. I'm understanding it. And I'm meeting it full on. I know what I signed up for, and we're going to embrace it because no one rises to low expectations. I want what this city wants. I want what Mr. Pagula deserves. I love that. All right, coming up next, there's been some big injury updates, including regarding Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, Dorian Strong, some big comments about Keon Coleman, and the Bills have a new offensive line coach and a lot to do on the coaching staff. We'll focus on that here next. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep on going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I love how it tracks all my subscriptions and lets me cancel them right in the app with just a few taps. No more hunting down customer service numbers. You can set budgets and goals, get personalized insights, and receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. It even consolidates your checking, savings, loans, and investments into a single dashboard so you get a clear view of your entire financial picture. So check it out. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it all. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, welcome back, folks. Some updates here. Josh Allen was there, and he was on crutches with a boot on his foot, and he had surgery and a broken bone in his foot, the 5th metatarsal. Dude's a dude, right? I mean, playing through a broken foot. And he didn't want you to know it either. Not until afterwards, right? And if there wasn't a new head coach press conference, I'm not sure you'd know right now either. No excuses for this man. I think a lot about Justin Herbert when he broke his hand. The whole world had to know. Daniel Jones, when he was playing with that leg injury, the whole world had to know. Josh Allen, I'm fine. I've never felt better. Guy's got a broken foot. That's our quarterback. That's our quarterback. And for all the people that yelled at me for saying that there was something significantly wrong with his foot, and I told you that time and time again, and you yelled at me and said that I'm making it up, well, here you go. Dalton Kincaid was at the presser and shared that he's not planning on having surgery on his torn PCL. I trust that he's met with people that give him good advice, right? I want that knee to get fixed. I want that knee to be right, and I want this man to be a star. And so I am hopeful that the right plan is in place here to get this knee right and for Dalton Kincaid to be healthy, available, and to become a superstar tight end like we know he can be. Brandon Beane said this about Dorian Strong. If you remember, a draft pick of the Bills last year, started in week 1, showed a lot of promise, and then had a neck injury, and then we never saw him again. And Sean McDermott really didn't say much about it and kind of hinted that it was serious. Well, now we know it's serious. In fact, Brandon Beane said it's a very serious deal. He's potentially going to have a procedure that will determine whether he can play. Football future is unknown. Well, that sucks, huh? Prayers up for Dorian Strong. And Joe Brady also had some very direct comments after he did like his regular press conference, and then he had like a breakout session with a pool of reporters. And in that conversation, he talked a little bit about Keon Coleman and said Keon Coleman is going to be on our football team. And he actually went as far as to say that the best thing that happened for Keon Coleman was for him to become the head coach. So I guess Keon Coleman's going to come back, and we'll hope that it comes together and that maturity happens and he can maintain and sustain a level of play that makes us feel good about his involvement in this offense. All right, let's talk about this coaching staff because there's a lot of work to do. Of course, they got a new head coach. That's Joe Brady, which means you need a new offensive coordinator. Aaron Cromer's retired. Bobby Babich is the passing game coordinator for the Packers. So you need a new defensive coordinator. Adam Henry, your wide receivers coach. He's now the wide receivers coach of the Steelers. I wish him well. Marcus West, another guy I wish well, our former defensive line coach. He's now the defensive line coach for the Bucs. And Jamiel Adai, that's a big one. He's now in Miami as their corners coach. I thought he did a great job in Buffalo. So that feels like one that hurts a little bit. But point being is that this coaching staff is going to flip. This is not just move Joe Brady from OC to head coach and move on with it. It's not that at all. At all. This is going to be a brand new coaching staff. Plus, we know the Bills need a new special teams coordinator. Chris Tabers with the Dolphins as well. So, what did Joe Brady say about assembling a coaching staff? He said, quote, "The biggest thing to me when putting together a staff is understanding the different type of personalities and making sure that you have a bunch of different backgrounds, both schematically, personality, and not just sitting there looking for a cookie cutter. If we have a bunch of Joe Bradys in the room, we're not going to grow and we're not going to evolve. And that's important to me. So putting together that staff, there's so many critical elements that I look for, different types of people. Some guys might be more fundamental driven. Some guys might be energy, the juice, the rah-rah guys. Some guys might be the calm communicators. It's understanding the type of rooms that they're coaching, and putting that room together is so important to me." He also said, "I'm not in the business of hiring my friends. We need to have different backgrounds and schemes. It's important to not have a bunch of guys that just think like him." Thought that was a good approach to building this thing. And also in Joe Brady's, or in in Brandon Beane, I got to learn all these new people, right? In Brandon Beane's breakout media session with the Bills reporters, he also said that Joe Brady will have final say on the staff. So I think Brandon Beane is in an oversight capacity to Joe Brady and his staff. But in terms of hiring decisions, Brandon Beane said, those are the people he has to work with. He has final say on that. So this will be the coaching staff that Joe Brady assembles. He has hired one coach, and it's a big one. It's the offensive line coach. Pat Meyer is your new offensive line coach. So let's talk about him a little bit in his background. He began working in the NFL with the Chicago Bears. And his first 4 years in the league were actually with Aaron Cromer. And so in 2013, he was hired to be the assistant offensive line coach under Mark Trestman, who was the head coach of the Bears. Well, the offensive coordinator for the Bears was Aaron Cromer. So for the 2 years that Aaron Cromer was the OC with the Bears, Pat Meyer, the new Bills offensive line coach, was the assistant offensive line coach with the Bears. Then in 2015, Pat Meyer actually came to Buffalo as an offensive assistant. He was there 2015 and 2016. Aaron Cromer was the Bills offensive line coach for those 2 seasons. So a lot of time with Cromer, and then really not after that. So After that staff gets released, right? That's the Rex Ryan staff. 2017 through 2019, he was the Chargers offensive line coach and run game coordinator. Think late stage Phillip Rivers, Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler, that group. Then he went to be the Panthers offensive line coach 2020 through 2021. And that, of course, was when Joe Brady was their offensive coordinator in Carolina. So, of course, there is some familiarity there in terms of how they communicate and speak and those types of things. And then 2022 through 2025, he was the Steelers offensive line coach. And I think you'll get a lot of mixed opinions about how things went with him in Pittsburgh. I will say this, he worked under Matt Canada and Arthur Smith as offensive coordinators, which, not super sound offensive coordinators there. But if there is something I really like about Pittsburgh and their offensive line is that over the last couple of years, they've drafted heavily into the offensive line, heavily. And I think a lot of these guys have really worked out for them. Of course, under Pat Meyer, they took Broderick Jones. Now, this is the one that's a little shaky. They took him in the first round. He was a pretty inexperienced player out of Georgia, and he's had some flashes. I don't think he's found consistency. But then the next year, they took Troy Fautanu out of Washington to play tackle. He's become a good right tackle for them. They also drafted Zach Frazier in the second round out of West Virginia, and he's very quickly become one of the best centers in the league. And they drafted Mason McCormick in the fourth round out of South Dakota State, and he's become a very good starting guard. And so that's really good. They drafted their offensive line, and Pat Meyer developed them, and they've all been pretty solid. In fact, I would say Broderick Jones hasn't quite met expectations, but I'd say Frazier and McCormick have exceeded expectations, and Fatanu's been really solid. And after being injured his rookie season, he came back this year and looked pretty strong. They also drafted another guy, Spencer Anderson, seventh rounder out of Maryland, who has become a very good substitute player, a reserve that's played four positions, has started quite a bit and looked solid. So all of these players they've drafted have come in and done a nice job while being part of some really goofy schemes with kind of bad quarterbacks. And so I'm pretty intrigued with this hire. Experienced some time with Brady, a lot of time with Cromer. Another one of those coaches where the players say, hey, they coach everybody different. They don't have like this uniform technique and the way that it has to be for every player. They understand the differences in skill sets, which is very Cromer-like. One other note about this, as the Bills have some big decisions to make with their interior offensive line, you have Connor McGovern and David Edwards as expiring contracts, and both guys that I think will get a lot on the open market. I think the Bills will have some transition there. And one guy that's a free agent in Pittsburgh is Isaac Seumalo, their left guard. He's a really good player. He's 32. And I'd love to see him come to Buffalo. Like maybe you can get him on a shorter term deal for less money as opposed to like David Edwards. Maybe David Edwards signs like a 4-year, $60 million deal with somebody. Well, maybe you'd rather just give Isaac Seumalo 2 years, $15 million. You see what I'm saying? And so I think that could happen. And so keep an eye on Isaac Seumalo, who's been with Pat Meyer for several years in Pittsburgh, that can come over and be potentially the Bills' starting left guard for a couple years. So keep an eye on that. All right, coming up next, defensive coordinator. The Bills need one of those. What did Joe Brady say about defensive football? Who are the candidates and who are my favorites? We'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post right at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. In fact, according to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. Puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. You can pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and you get tickets within minutes. You'll love being able to see the all-in price up front, so there's no surprise fees coming at checkout. Plus, being able to see the view from your seat will make the purchase decision very easy. They got great deals on last-minute tickets. Everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. All right, the Bills are going to have a new defense, and I think that's pretty exciting. Bobby Babich, the passing game coordinator for the Packers, he interviewed for that job, that defensive coordinator job, a couple of years ago, and they gave it to Jeff Hafley, who's now the head coach of the Dolphins. Sean McDermott sitting out 2026. So the Bills will have a new defensive coordinator. What did Joe Brady say about that side of the ball? He said, the privilege that I've had of calling plays, you understand what keeps you up at night. I feel like defensive football for so many years was just putting stress on quarterbacks. You get to the line of scrimmage, and they're putting stress on quarterbacks pre-snap, post-snap. Nowadays, the best defenses and the best minds are continuous all the way through the play call, putting stress on coordinators. No longer are you able to just know where guys are going to be, when they're going to be there. And I think that's a key element of what I'm looking for in a defense, making sure that we have the versatility to be able to change personnels, get a lot of different people in different spots. It's similar to what we do offensively. I don't believe offensive football and defensive football should have different mindsets. That's really different than what Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich would tell you in terms of, hey, you want to substitute as little as possible because you want reps and time on task together. Joe Brady's telling you, no, we want different people that can get to different spots. I'm excited to see what that means and how that comes together. But as we consider some of the candidates, some of the rumored candidates, of course, Jim Leonard, the Denver Broncos passing game coordinator, played for the Bills, was a great defensive coordinator in college at Wisconsin. He's been part of some good Denver Broncos defenses. You got Raheem Morris, potentially former Falcons head coach, has had some really good defenses throughout the years. You know, those feel like a couple of guys that are rumored. Jim Schwartz with the Cleveland Browns. It's kind of a sticky situation because he's still under contract with the Browns. I'd love to get Jim Schwartz. I would not trade for him. No way. Not a chance. But, you know, maybe he shakes free and you can get him. There's Anthony Weaver, who I'd love to get. If he doesn't get a head coaching job, I'd love to get Anthony Weaver to run this defense. A couple other guys that are interesting to me that are not rumored. Al Harris, the Bears defensive backs coach, had a really nice run coaching the Cowboys defensive backs. Comes from that Dennis Allen tree, which would be familiar to Joe Brady because of their time together in New Orleans. There's also Carl Scott, who's done a good job as the Seahawks defensive backs coach and passing game coordinator. So the thing about a lot of the guys that I just mentioned is that they would represent very significant scheme changes. This wouldn't be a 4-3 penetration style defense. This would be potentially a 3-4, multiple fronts, really different. And so maybe the question you have is, like, do the Bills have the ability to utilize a lot of their existing personnel to fit that scheme? And, you know, how much would they need to do to bring in skill sets to make it work? Well, I would first acknowledge some of the expiring contracts on defense. Joey Bosa, Daquan Jones, Matt Milano, AJ Epinesa, Trey White, Shaq Thompson, Jordan Poyer, and realize that you're going to have a lot of transition no matter what. Like, you are always going to have to get some new pieces. Like, let's assume that the Bills didn't make a change at head coach. It's Sean McDermott, it's Bobby Babich. You would still need a starting nose. You would still need probably a starting linebacker, a starting safety, a starting defensive end, and not to mention depth. I don't think that's really that much different with a switch. I still think you are going to get, like, if they go to more of a 3-4, and look, if they go with Raheem Morris or Jim Leonard, those are more attack-oriented 3-4s that are not like your typical Belichick 3-4 where you have the three, tanks up front with your two traditional rush outside linebacker with your downhill thumpers at off ball, right? Like, these are very different types of 3-4s that have some penetration elements to them, kind of like what the Broncos have, what the Falcons have run, what the Rams have run. And so I don't think they're that far off. I think Greg Rousseau will fit fine as like a John Franklin Myers type 5-tech. I think Ed Oliver can kind of fit that Zach Allen role in Denver, or like if you go to what the Rams have, like what they've done with Kobe Turner. I think about Michael Hoyt's a very, very clean projection. Your corners will be fine with Hairston and Benford. We'll see what happens in the slot. I think Jordan Hancock's versatility can really help. Cole Bishop will be fine, but you need a running mate there. So I don't think it's that heavy of a lift, to be honest with you, because the lift was always going to be heavy because you had so many players to replace regardless of what you were doing. And so specifically for more of that Jim Leonard style of defense, you will need a little bit more of a traditional nose, but not like your Vince Wilfork nose, but like your younger, better version of Daquan Jones. Like, I think that type of player. You'll need some speed rush, right? You'll need some guys with that burst and bend off the edge. I think Michael Hoyt can be an answer for you, but you're going to want kind of that Nick Bonito type, that Jalen Walker type player, the James Pierce, those types of guys. You will need more of a downhill presence at linebacker. So that'll be a need. You need a running mate for Cole Bishop. Hopefully that's a guy that offers a lot of versatility. And then we'll see what happens in the slot. So I'm not afraid of a bit of a transition because, like I said, regardless of what your scheme was, there was going to be transition. And it's going to put a lot on Brandon Beane to get creative with blending, maybe some bigger investments with some one-year mercenaries, with some, value in the draft to kind of piece it all together, not to mention what you're going to need on the interior offensive line, what you're going to need at receiver. So there's a lot that has to come together, but that's pretty much always true late January. There's a puzzle that you got to figure out. And we're starting to get an idea as to what that's going to look like. And so I'm excited to kind of have a bit of an understanding of the direction here, and that's going to allow us to really have the right conversations moving forward. And we got a lot to do. We got to really start building the foundation of our off-season content, which will start happening very, very soon, where we start to assess and evaluate and really get into the different position groups and what decisions need to be made, and how to get this team over the hump. So we'll start to do that very, very soon here on Locked On Bills. Don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.